Hello and welcome back to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
And we are still a continent removed. Our last time we began talking to each other from Brazil, this time still Brazil versus America, me here in New Mexico. But I know that you're heading stateside soon, so we'll be back person to person, I would imagine, shortly. But glad for technology and the opportunity to continue the conversation.
Yes, and it's Brazil and America, not versus.
Correct. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to imply that for
We're
sure.
not in a football match or a soccer match.
Probably a good thing because both of our
Yeah,
households would be all up in arms.
that's right.
Well, there has been so much happening in global news. There's been so much happening here stateside. When you and I connected just prior to starting this recording, you made some comments about, man, what's happened since I left? And it does seem like
I don't want to leave again.
I know, it does seem like an extraordinary amount of chaos everywhere that we turn. And it's really easy to become despondent, and it's easy to become almost disassociated from it because there's a limit to how much bad news we can absorb, and we just don't want to process it anymore and kind of shut it off. But I started thinking about, we do need to be aware of what's going on, but we need to be able to also approach things with a sense of hope for the future. Because if we just have eyes towards all of the bad news that's going on all around us, it can really deflate us, and it can really cause us to really get into this kind of dark way of thinking about maybe our own future, the future of our business, our company, our relationships. And so I thought it was very timely for us to talk about hope today. And is there a way to generate more hope when you feel like you're lacking it?
Yeah, and I think that there's probably some techniques. I'd certainly like to hear others' techniques, but I think I've got some thoughts on that subject. But back to why hope is important. I think that if hope is lost, then there's a reason why people say all hope is lost, and that's such a devastating statement. Because without hope, I don't know, it's hard to move forward. It's hard to even exist. And I think we need hope for ourselves and for those around us. We need encouragement,
Yeah.
and we need building up. We need folks that we know are in our corner and that are gonna, love us despite ourselves. The old saying I used to say is, find somebody to talk to that knows everything about you but likes you anyway.
Yep.
Uh, and how do we find those people? How do we surround ourselves with those people? And yet, like you said, be aware of the world, be understand how to go out into the world, and exist in a world where it seems like there's not only a lack of hope, but there's people who just seem like they want to take your hope from you.
Mm. I know that you and I are wired pretty differently. You're much more glasses half full. I skew, unfortunately, on the glasses half empty. And so I am very aware that, there are personality types that maybe are more hopeful by default. And I certainly want to learn some characteristics of what it is to I don't want to say self-generate hope, but to at least reset the mind so that my thoughts are on hopeful thoughts. Because, as you're pointing out, if we don't have that adequate level of hope, it's a struggle.
So yeah, and there's a couple things that have given me hope when I've seen them. One, there's this great Venn diagram that says um, things I like, things I don't like, and then the intersection is things that are going to change. In other words, whether you like it or don't like it, it's going to change. And that gets back towards that. I'm an engineer, and in physics, you have this sine wave theory of life, right? Where every economy, politics, discourse, everything kind of goes in a sine wave.
Yeah.
And so, you can kind of count on things changing. Now, I always kind of hope things are going to change for the better. I've been surprised lately at how we've got to hit bottom in discourse. We've got to hit a place where people are going to start thinking there's probably more that unifies us than separates us. There's probably more things that we know that we have in common that separate it than we don't have in common. And then people are going to start kind of realizing that and going back that direction. I've been kind of shocked of how long this decline has been.
Mm.
But I still have to think that at some point people are going to get tired of fighting. I mean, it's just no fun.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping, right?
Right.
There's an ancient proverb, and I may have even brought it up here on the podcast before, I don't remember, but it's the phrase that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And there is a very literal need to have things to hope in and hope towards, I think, for us as human beings, us in our culture. And when we get to a place, maybe because of prolonged hardship, prolonged, fighting, whether we're talking about, interpersonal fighting, in your family or work context, or maybe you find yourself in a country that's been war torn, there is a weariness of soul that happens with prolonged aggravation or aggressive behaviors that are around you. And so we desperately need to find that nugget of hope to cling on to. And so I think let's maybe come up with some ideas as best as we're able to, just off the cuff here. How do we begin to really generate some hope when we kind of feel that hope barometer is low in ourselves, and we know that we need to shift our gaze, shift our focus onto something that is hopeful?
Something that always works for me is to think about what I'm grateful for.
Mm,
Think about the many blessings, the many things that are going right in my life. And despite how bad things can be in certain parts of our life, in relationships and work and in school, depending on what you're doing in your life right now, but there's always those things that you can be grateful for.
mm-hmm.
And you can start even on a bad day with, what, I'm alive.
Yeah.
I'm taking my next breath.
Yeah.
um, I have my sight, I have my senses, I am not on my deathbed today. I am, I have some food in the refrigerator. I have, and you can start with those little things and just start a list. It's not hard to come up with 20, 30, even 50 things that are pretty good, actually, and that we can be grateful for.
Yeah. I told my daughter, I'm sure you hear it in my voice. I've been sick the last couple of days. I've got this, whatever it is, it's kind of moved into my chest and settled in there. And it's been really uncomfortable, and even a struggle to, have big full breaths. I told my daughter, I said, I'm really thankful that I don't have ongoing breathing issues, because in the moments when you do experience sickness, you think about the people with chronic illness or COPD or, asthma or things of that nature. And to even recognize an attitude of thankfulness when you're sick, that's not your normal state of affairs. I hope that I can often stop and recognize that even when I am feeling sick or uncomfortable.
Yeah, and as we recognize that there are people probably listening to this right now who do have chronic illness,
Yeah.
but when you have an acute situation, which means it's going to go away soon, it certainly makes you grateful that your normal state is not that. I don't know how people do it. I know people who have frequent headaches, even migraines.
Migraines, yeah.
When I have a headache, I'm a baby, right? And I am just not a happy guy, and I don't do well around people. And I'm thinking, man, there's people who live with this a lot.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there are things we can be grateful for is the point. And
Yes.
and making a list of that, it's hard for me to stay down and without hope as I'm writing things I'm grateful for.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think one of the helpful tools that we can implement, and we've touched on this again in past podcasts, but is to think back about the milestones that you've achieved after having come through a hard time. So it's a little bit different than gratitude. It's a remembrance, but it's kind of picking up on a theme of, I've been through a challenging season before, I've been through extreme difficulty before, and I've made it through, and I have a success story to share on the other side, or a testimony about, what I endured. And so remembering those kind of markers along your life journey, I think is another one to help generate some hope that, oh, this challenging time right now is not going to last forever.
That's right. And back to that Venn diagram, things that won't last, all right,
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad, and your interpretation of same. And you know, you and I both have a friend who is constantly reminding us also that, you know, who knows what's good and bad.
Yeah.
You know, there's sometimes we interpret things as bad when they're really good and or good for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes things that are good for us in the end aren't good for us in the middle, at least in our perception.
Certainly. And just to, I think, give a little illustration about what you're talking about, you may think, oh man, it's the worst thing. I've missed my flight and then my connection's going to be messed up, et cetera, et cetera. But perhaps it's by missing that flight, you have a really life-changing, impactful conversation because you have an extra 6 hours to wait in the airport, or, perhaps there was some other catastrophe even that you've avoided by not getting on that plane. And so, the upfront assessment of good versus bad, sometimes only time will bear that out to prove, in the long haul, which side of the scale it falls on. And often we're not properly equipped to make that assessment.
Right. I think the other thing for me about hope is if I think I've got some level of control. So
Mm,
I think thinking about what is my level of control here realistically,
mhm.
because if I have no control over something, well, maybe I'm trying to control something I really have no business trying to control,
Mm.
which is a lot of things in my life and a lot of people. And then there's, you know, things that I can control. There are things that I can get up and do instead of just, you know, kind of wallowing, right? And so I think that there's a realistic assessment of what is my level of control in this situation. I think is sometimes appropriate. I
Yeah.
think we can sometimes lose hope if we think we have more control in the situation that's going bad than we do, or vice versa.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. I've been wrestling through a situation the last number of weeks where, in a series of relationships, there's been some things that have happened that have been really painful and really challenging. And the response of the other person is utterly out of my control. There is nothing I can do. And I almost felt like I had to get to this pinnacle of pain and discomfort before I could even say, okay, I'm washing my hands of this notion that I can intervene or fix something or change it, or that even by my sheer will or my stress or my anxiety, I'm going to make the situation better. I finally just had to get to that point of giving up control. And to me, it was funny that was when the hope came in a little bit. It's like, oh, it's not on my shoulders to fix this. And there was just a natural kind of hopefulness that came when I finally got it through my thick head that I can't fix it.
That's right. And that you said it much better than I did, but that was the intent of that statement was, you know, I cannot control other people and I
Yeah.
cannot control these situations. And once you try to stop controlling it, it sometimes is where you can find the hope, because then you can say, okay, then what I can do is start thinking about what is my response to it. I can't control the situation. I can't control what's happening. Certainly can't control other people, but I can control myself, my reaction to it. I can control, you know, my response to it, and if necessary, get myself out of the situation.
Yeah.
You know, there's that part of it too. But again, it's that sense of what is my level of control realistically in that
Mhm.
situation, and should I be thinking about that in there? So gratitude, level of control. What other things do you think might help build hope in a given situation? And it's usually in the middle of things, right?
Mhm.
Um, not in the beginning. We sometimes have hope, sometimes misplaced hope, more hope than we should
Yeah.
have. And then at the end, you know, I think we're hopeful that you know, okay, that's done now, and I can move on. What have I learned, and things like that. But it is kind of in the middle, isn't it?
Yeah. I was thinking about the war that's going on with Ukraine and Russia, and how I've been hearing lots of reports from, I know a few people that are on the ground that live in Ukraine, and you hear the reports about the stress level and what's happened after you've passed that year mark of bombings and just what it does on your physical and mental well-being. And yet they remain a people of hope, and the joy and delight that they find in just the small things that happen, whether it's a recognition of a sunny day in the midst of a gloomy outlook, or I'm not meaning to paint this irreverently, but finding a beautiful blossom in the middle of destruction, or having somebody provide a meal when there's been stress about how to get food for the day. There's great hope derived from these little small acts or small observations that really are astonishing. And I think sometimes in the most dire of situations, it just takes a spark, that minuscule amount of hope to bring a change of heart and mind when there's been so much turmoil.
And I think what you've just described is the other coin of that whole gratitude thing. In other words, when major things have been taken away from you, you start appreciating the little things.
Yeah.
And the little things are, and we can do that through crisis, like many things, or we can do it proactively, right? And start to try to notice those little things too. I mean, if I think about just yesterday when I got to experience this wonderful, birthday celebration in another culture,
Mm.
and the different, and just observing and becoming aware and amazed at the different interactions with people and the different way things were done, and thinking, that this is the kind of stuff that happens in birthday celebrations that I've just taken for granted in the States that are different. But I just got to see them with whole new eyes.
Yeah. Well, and I think looking for those just little markers of joy and appreciation, yes, it falls under the gratitude spectrum for sure. But I think there are just in our natural observation, choosing to observe the blessing in a situation, whether it's already naturally happy or whether it's a dire situation, but choosing to seek after observations of little moments of joy, I think again can be an instrument in raising your hope level.
No question. No question. I totally agree with that. So what else can we do in the middle of a hopeless situation, or something where we feel like things our hope is slipping?
I think giving of ourselves,
Mm.
there's that act of service does such a reset in almost every category. We are finding ourselves down or forlorn. And if we take a moment to offer a kind word, to handwrite a card, to do a little baked good, or send a little care package, or, just some gesture of kindness and service to somebody else, it does wonders for us as we engage in that act of service.
So good. I That is so good. And I remember sometimes feeling kind of down and hopeless, especially in the middle of the day. And when I was serving at noonday and at a soup kitchen locally, and how much better I felt afterwards, just because of those acts of service and giving of yourself. And not only does it kind of get you out of your own head and your own problems, but there's a and I don't know if it's endorphins, like when you're running, but there's positive things that happen in your brain when you are serving others. There's just no question about that. There's been some long-term studies on volunteerism, as a matter of fact, and how people who volunteer in their community are absolutely way more healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, than those who don't. And and this is something that I think is currently getting lost, is people are so much into going out and like fighting or arguing for a cause, or Twitter blasting for their side, their agenda, as opposed to just letting the agenda go and just going and helping somebody in a way. And by the way, we may need help in parts of our lives, but we all have strengths and weaknesses. So if we can go help somebody who's got a weakness that we can help with in our strength, and vice versa, I mean, that's kind of how society is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said something just a moment ago about running. And I remembered seeing something that was posted on, a social platform just a few days ago from a friend of mine who is an ultra marathoner, does those 100-mile plus races. And she said something along the lines of, hey, if you go out to be a spectator of a race, don't stand there stoic faced and dismissive of everybody until your person comes into view. Have a smile on your face and celebrate everyone who runs past you, because you don't know what that does to somebody as they're struggling along the course. And I thought, man, what a good picture of what we can do for human beings, for one another. You don't know where somebody is on their marathon journey. They may be just starting out, or they may be on mile, 99 of a 100-miler, and they're worn out and they are close to the end, but they need that little shot in the arm of hope and encouragement. And just by raising your countenance and smiling and having a good encouraging word for somebody, man, how transformative that can be.
No, I mean, that's a great visualization, because those are the kind of things that encouraging somebody in the race is just such a great visualization, because we can do it for all people, not just the people we like.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other part of what you just said, not just for your person, but for everyone.
Yeah. Have I told you my old lady with the sign story about the marathon? I'll take 2 minutes to share it. So my husband and I had an opportunity to go do the Jerusalem Marathon. And so Jerusalem, for people that are unfamiliar, has a very, very hilly terrain, like almost San Francisco hilly. I mean, radical, radical hills. And so I had trained hard, was ready to do a half marathon, but then had messed up my knee pretty good. And I was going to get through the 10K, and I was going to feel pretty darn proud of myself for getting through the 10K. And I crest this hill, and I was so tired. And there's this group of old ladies holding up a poster, and it said, "Way to go. That was the last hill." And I was like, oh, thank goodness. I was so encouraged. And it gave me like a little pep in my step, and I kept going. And then all of a sudden I noticed, like, wait, I'm going uphill again. It's like, I'm really going uphill. And I crest the next hill, and there's another group of old ladies at the bottom of that hill with a sign that said, "Way to go, last hill." I'm like, oh, you old ladies. It wasn't accurate to the course, but there was something just about the fact that they were there with a sign to encourage everybody. It was hilarious and also maddening all in one.
Exactly. No, but it's a great metaphor too for life too, because just because it's not the last hill doesn't mean you can't encourage people like it
Right.
is. In other words, at least you got through another one,
Yeah.
right? And isn't that what life is? It's a series of hills.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, I think we're at a point where we probably can wrap up for today. I'm thankful for the connection that we can speak in different countries, but I'm always eager to get back face to face, where we don't have to rely on internet and all of the complications of trying to do a recording when we're so far removed. But I will wish you very safe travels as you head back to the States. We'll look forward to being together again. And just, let's maybe close it out with a word of encouragement for people just to keep their eyes on the hope ahead.
Yeah, and be grateful for the things that you have in your life, and the fact that you've got people around you, and focus on those people around you. I mean, we can't go solve things that are happening in other, countries or other states or even other cities, but we can absolutely have a positive impact in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods, and in our own families, and the people who are around us, and even the person at the checkout counter at the
Yeah.
store. And
Yep.
just have that, be the little old lady with the sign
That's
that's
right.
just encouraging people on their run and saying, hey, good job getting to the last hill, even if it's not.
Yeah. Very good. All right, Gary, thanks so much. I'll see you next time, and we'll wish all of you a fantastic week. And, to Gary's point earlier, if you've got some suggestions about how you can elevate hope in your life, and maybe they're pointers that we can take for our own, please do drop a comment on whatever platform you're seeing this on or listening to this on. So we thank you always for hanging out with us right here on Curiosity, Not Judgment. Have a good one.
Take care.